Hi everyone, this is Michelle. I have the Hearthside blog. I'm the writer. This is going to be my last video that I get out today. Just going through some of my old blog entries, making them more accessible by having a video form of them. I am going to run out of quiet space to work very shortly, so hopefully I get through this one. And this particular entry is called The Omnis and Why They Matter, and specifically in the heathen context, why these concepts matter. This video was inspired by one of my favorite heathen YouTubers, and that is Eric Wordweaver Shervin. If you haven't checked out his blog, or his video log, I guess, his channel, The Raven's Call, definitely worth checking out. I will pop a link to that in the description. So the difference being is he came from a background that was not too religious growing up, definitely not too Christian. I think the majority, but not everyone in heathenry, did come from a Christian background, so that's a bit of an unusual perspective that he's coming in from. Now, my own background in Christianity was not very strict by any means. I left the church quite young. I started questioning even younger. And there was a huge gap in the middle where I just sort of floated along not knowing what I believed. And that definitely helped to shape my own views. Now, when I became aware of the Omnis, and if you're not familiar with this, this is a concept in metaphysics, in philosophy, about the nature of God, or the gods, basically. When I was not even identifying as a heathen yet, but definitely experimenting with paganism in my early college years, I took a metaphysics class, and my professor was really into the British empiricists, and we had pretty much a whole class where we were just discussing whether God was real, and he was using the monotheistic idea of God, not specifically Christian necessarily, but monotheistic. And I remember being in that class, and like, it hadn't really dawned on me, I hadn't really spent too much time. I'm like, I know I'm not a Christian. I didn't really know what exactly I believed, but until he started talking about this in this class, I'm like, like, now I see the pieces that weren't fitting for me. So there's 4 Omnis, and here was where Eric and I had a little discussion on one of his videos. He did talk about omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence in a video, but there's also a 4th Omni called Omnibenevolence. He thought it wasn't really related to heathenry. I'm going to argue it is, but let's just go over the basics first. So, omnipotence is the belief that God or the gods are all-powerful, and these are things that in monotheism they believe. Omniscience is the belief that God or the gods are all-knowing. And omnipresence means that the belief that the gods are all presence, or they can be everywhere at once, basically. The 4th one, omnibenevolence, means that the gods are all good. That means that they don't have a darker side to them, basically. So, the purpose of the philosophy class that I was in when we were discussing the nature of God in relation to the Omnis was he was trying to show us that it was impossible for God to exist because it was impossible to be all four of these things at once. And I immediately started questioning that, not because I thought that you could be all of those things at once, but because I'm like, but what if I don't believe? And the first thing that jumped into my head, what if I don't believe that the gods are omnibenevolent? I don't believe that they're all good. That's not possible. There's too many bad things that happen in the world. I don't think it's possible for the gods to be that way. And I brought that up, and he's like, no, just assume, for the sake of this argument, for this argument to work, you have to assume that if there is a god, that the god is going to be omnibenevolent. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do that. Like, even for the thought experiment, I don't know. That was the one that immediately struck me as being impossible. And when I was talking back and forth with Eric Wordweaver over his video about this, he's like, I don't really think that it fits into heathenry to talk about omnibenevolence. And then he did end up posting a video and pretty much just reiterating that he didn't think it fit into heathenry, but this is exactly why I think it is an important concept to heathenry, is because it doesn't fit. It's because if you have an idea of how monotheistic religion views God, their God, and that their God fits into all of these categories, if you're able to keep that in your mind when you're thinking about heathenry, it broadens your understanding of what your belief is, and what works and what doesn't work for you, and the way that you view your gods, and the way that polytheism views gods that is different from monotheism. So that's really what this post is about. I broke it down. It was the omnibenevolence that hit me first as being not possible, but when you think about it, are the gods omnipotent? Are they all powerful? No, because they still make mistakes. We see the stories that in Ragnarok, some of them are going to lose, supposedly, and according to the lore. Like, they're not all powerful. They're more powerful than us. They're bigger than us. They're greater than us. But all powerful? No. They're not. They're not. And the same thing with omniscience. Are they all knowing? Well, some of them are more knowing than others. Like, Odin knows more, for example, or Mimir, if you consider Mimir God. In some contexts he is within the lore, in some contexts he's more like a Jotun. They're pretty wise. They're pretty all-knowing. But that's not true of all the gods. And do they actually know everything, or they just know quite a bit more than everyone else? So that doesn't really fit either. I mean, that one probably of the four fits the best within heathenry as being a possibility of omniscience for deities. Omnipresence, are they all around us? The majority of heathens would say no, they're not everywhere at once. You have to call them in to your ritual, and then you need to have enough draw that they're going to be interested in attending even so. Like, the more people you have, the more likely that they'll notice you, or the better your offerings, or whatever, they're more likely to see you. So they're not everywhere at once. They're not looking at us. That's a monotheistic idea that God is everywhere looking at us at once, and they do the same thing when they're talking about Santa Claus in Christianity. Like, he sees you when you're sleeping, he sees when you're awake. Like, that's getting children used to the idea that this God sees everything, and it feeds right into that idea of guilt culture, of you having to feel guilty about things that you perceive that you've done wrong, whether or not they're wrong or not, like things that you think other people aren't going to like you for without any verification. It's all internalized. And the fear of an omnipresent being is what really drives that home, what creates that guilt within people in monotheistic belief system. So yeah, my thought is, why talk about the Omnis in regards to heathenry? It's because none of them really apply to heathenry, but they do apply to monotheistic belief, and we have to be able to compare ourselves to monotheistic belief. It's all around us. We need to be able to explain what is different between our beliefs and theirs so that we can have a reasonable discussion. We can bring ideas to the table that they can understand and relate to and see what we're talking about and get a better understanding of where we're coming from. So the Omnis are important to heathenry as a philosophical descriptor that can relate polytheism to monotheism so that we can have a discussion. Yeah, that's pretty much it. In my actual blog, I talked about the argument that was attributed to Epicurus about whether God could exist, basically. And it says, is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he's not omnipotent. Is he able but not willing? Well, then he's malevolent instead of benevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then whence cometh evil? And if he neither is able nor willing, then why call him a god? So this is the basis for this philosophical discussion about whether God exists, and if God does exist in monotheism, whether he's worshipful, basically. Now, as a heathen, I don't think that my gods are any of these things, but I still think they're worshipful because they're greater than us. They do good things, but they don't just do good things. And I take a lot of comfort in that, honestly, because if my God was capable of doing only good, if he was supposed to be only good and he wasn't actually doing things to prevent the horrible things that happen in the world, I think I would have questions about why I was worshipping him. But because I know that the gods are not that great, they can't change everything, I find that to be more realistic and believable, and it just makes more sense to me. So yeah, I think that's pretty much sums up that whole discussion. I will drop my links in the description as always, and they're also in the description on my blog, and I hope that you all have a great day. Thank you.